I've just bought this Peugeot 106 for £500. It's super slow and doesn't really have much going for it. That's why I'm going to be removing this engine to put a slightly faster one in. The engine from this 1300cc Hayabusa, capable of doing over 200 mile an hour with around 180 horsepower. Now you might be thinking, how is that Hayabusa engine going to fit in this little Peugeot 106? Well, I don't know. But what I do know is that that engine from the Peugeot needs to come out. So let's call that step one. Once that's done, I'm going to call step two, remove the bike engine. And what's step three? Figure out the chain drive. Step three is going to be figure out how to drive the wheels. Step four is going to sound easier than it probably will be, but that is to mount the engine. And then finally, step five is going to be wiring and all the other ancillaries like the fuel system, cooling system, exhaust, etc. And that's it. I've only got 5 steps, so let's crack on and remove the engine out of the Peugeot. So I bought this engine crate brand new off eBay and then realised I don't even have a chain to lift the engine out. So since I'm ripping the interior out, I guess the seatbelt will have to do. So that is step one complete and we're only like 2 minutes in. This is going to be so easy. Next step is take the bike engine out. So let's get the engine out. Where'd you start with getting an engine out of a bike? I can't even ride this bike. I ain't got the licence. That might be the last time it ever runs. Let's start taking it apart then.
Can you sound a bit more thrilled?
All the Hayabusa people are going to be crying over this. Let me know in the comments if you think it's going to feel fast. Full of fuel that is. I might be dead fuel, seriously. I'm being deadly serious. People will be saying, why did you take that engine out of the bike? And I'll say, I don't know. So, it's not quite as simple as a pit bike, is it? Bloody complicated this. How many wires are disconnected to something? A lot. And it still works. Big bloody project this. They've not done a very good job of blocking that up, have they? Look at this, it's got air intakes through the frame that go right the way to the front. That's right cool, isn't it? So that is the engine out the bike. As you can see, the garage is an absolute tip. So let's get this tidied up and I'll probably call it a day for today. It is the next day and step 1 and step 2 are complete. The car engine's out, the bike engine's out. What I've got to do now is take the differential out of the Peugeot gearbox to try and convert it to chain drive. I'm going to try and do it by taking the standard Peugeot differential, which I'm drawing now, getting a sprocket machine to fit on the outside so that when the sprocket spins, it spins the Peugeot drive shafts, which are connected to the wheels. So it spins the Peugeot wheels. All I've got to do then is connect the sprocket to the engine via a chain. And then we should have drive. So that's the diff out. I went a bit caveman on the gearbox, to be honest, so did have to put a hole in the gearbox. But it's out and that's the main thing. And then I'm just removing the ring gear so I can put a motorbike sprocket around the outside of the differential. And also removing the bearings so I can put new ones on. So that's the diff all prepped, converted to chain drive. I'll show you how I've done it. So this is a standard diff out of the Peugeot. I've had to have it machined down just on the edge there. Then I've welded these tabs around the edge. They will accept a sprocket, which will sit on there, line up with the holes. Then, if you flip it over, we're going to have all these gears inside here, which is going to be filled with CV grease. So to stop that going everywhere, I've made this little cup, which is going to sit on there, seal around there, seal around the top, and then we should have a sealed unit. Let's get it together. That's the diff all sorted and converted to chain drive. Now I just need something to hold the engine in place, engine mounts. So let's get to making them. So the engine is finally in, mocked up with a sprocket at the back. It's pretty close, so it's got to sit quite far forward. But what I'm thinking first is make a bar across the front, mounted into here to pick up the head mounts. And then once it's all lined up with that, I can worry about the back ones. I've had an idea for the second mount, let me show you. So this is the first support I've done. Just going to the front there. I don't know how I'm going to fit the bumper on because the engine sits so far forward, but worry about that another time. And then I've got this back mount to do, So what I'm thinking, bolt to the gearbox, bar across, couple of tabs, pick this up, carry on, bolt to the other side. So I'm going to try and keep the stock engine mounts and just use that. Oh, it's bad news, guys. Not what I want to be doing. So I've literally just got all the engine mounts done today, and then I went to bolt this one up, just caught it with a spanner on this corner, and we had a massive crack here where it had rusted through. So I took the wheel arch lining out, and there was a big crack all down here. There's all holes here where it's been patched. And then it goes all the way up. So I don't know what to do. It's just more work on top of doing the whole engine swap. I've obviously cut this out. This is what was here. So just absolutely, this is like from the strut top. Alright, that's enough of the dramatics. Seriously though, I'm in well too deep to let a bit of rust stop me at this point, even if it means reshelling this car, which I am definitely not doing. So out came the grinder, the car's favourite tool and my least favourite tool. Now, it might look like I've made it worse, that's because I've got a massive hole to fix, and it's a bit too big for the noodles and filler this time. So I cut up some sheet metal and welded it in. Anyways, the rust is gone, let's move on to the fun stuff. I've just chucked some matte black on it to protect it. It's not pretty, but it'll do the job. I'm also waiting for drivetrain parts, ordered off eBay, coming from China, I didn't realise. So I've got nothing to do for the time being. So what I'm thinking today is, let's do something with this horrible interior. The seats are literally falling out. There's mould all over the seats, all over the floor. Got these bucket seats off Facebook for 300 quid. Also picked up a steering wheel. That's lovely, innit? My God, look how dirty this is. There's quite a bit of money in here. And when I say loads of money, I mean about 6 quid, which is pretty much the only thing I wanted to keep from this interior. So I'm taking everything out of this car for that weight reduction because it's basically 3 horsepower, and we're gonna need all the help we can get. Oh, and the fact it's had 25 years of dirt build-up, making it disgustingly minging, is another huge reason to skip all of this. It's surprising how much you can remove from a car. And these lightweight bucket seats and racing steering wheel should definitely help keep the weight down. Right, interior stripped, which I'm very happy about because them seats were minging. Anyway, the drivetrain parts have come, so I can move on to step 3. Figure out how to do the drivetrain. So if you watched the last video, you've already seen me take the standard diff out of the Peugeot gearbox, which is this thing. This is what's going to drive the wheels, and somehow I've managed to attach a sprocket to it so that the bike engine can power it using a chain like it's used to. Now that I know where that needs mounting, I can crack on making some box contraption to hold it all in place. Then once all that's welded together, you kind of get the idea I was going for. The sliding movement allows for the chain adjustment, just like you'd have on the bike. But this led to some problems, which I'll get into later on in the video. Take 2, I decided to make the diff housing again, but this time beefing it up using 10mm steel plate, 10mm angle iron and M16 bolts. There you can see the old one on the bench. At this point I'd not tested out, I just wanted to be sure it was solid. I even drilled 12 holes in each angle iron section to plug weld as well as welding around the edge. You'd think this would be strong enough, wouldn't you? So this is me from the future. All that you've seen me just make, I've had to remake 3 times because I tried setting off and bent all the engine mount the first time. Fuck's sake. So this is the old engine mount which mounted the engine, and then I had the diff mounted in these. This is the first one I made, which is out of 5mm steel plate. Then I got scared that wasn't going to be enough, so I made it out of 10mm steel plate and angle iron with M16 bolts to slide back and forward on the chain. Then I tried driving and it just bent the whole bar and twisted all this that I'd made. So that's when I had to remake it out of 10mm steel plate, more tubing, reinforce it all, and take the chain slack up with a spring roller. But anyway, let's get this thing done and move on to the last step, which is about 5 steps in one, but we'll start with the wiring. Now, wiring's not my strong point, so my professional technique was cut away what I think I didn't need, check to see if what I do need still works, and if it didn't, then reattach what I cut off. I basically wanted to use the whole bike wiring loom, ECU, clocks and everything to make it run, but I did need to use some of the Peugeot wiring for things like the lights and the wipers. So I kind of merged the two together, using a relay to power up the Peugeot's body control module whenever the bike's ignition was turned on. I probably soldered well over 100 wires doing this, just extending wiring like the ignition, the clocks, the fuel pump and so on. Then I chucked a battery in the boot, connected it up and hoped for the best. And I think I'm finally past the halfway point now. It's given me that final push of motivation to get this thing finished. It's taken way too long, mainly because I'd had to remake the drivetrain after trial and error. But now I'm just knocking up a quick exhaust straight out the side because I ain't letting this build take any longer than it needs to. I literally just cut these new bends to weld in off a spare exhaust I had. And after a quick wire brush and some heat wrap, how sick does that look? And if you've made it this far, please don't forget to like, share, comment and subscribe. Also, let me know what you'd like to see next on the channel. Now the radiator's all connected up and the cooling system's filled, I've literally just got the final last bits to do on the car. Throwing the bike's fuel tank in the boot makes things easy, and I've just got to connect the fuel pump wiring which I extended earlier and run a new fuel line underneath the car. And even though at this point the car might actually start and drive, I wouldn't get far without a shifter. So I made this shifter mechanism which I'm super proud of and was probably one of my most favourite parts to make out of this whole build. It just feels great, and knowing that I made the whole thing out of tubing and plate, it's even better. Then I've just got to connect the shifter up to the engine. And I've been dying to get these rusty brakes off for so long. I pretty much bought a big brake kit not long after I bought the car, so it feels mint to know that I've got them bolted up, and a massive upgrade from the little discs that were there before. And of course bigger brakes mean that I need bigger wheels. But now I think it is time I can try the first start on the car. Let's see if it starts. Underwhelming. So at first it had only run on WD-40. That's because I'd left some off the wiring loom called a tilt sensor, which basically tells the bike, or car in this case, if it's tipped over in the event of an accident, it'll cut the fuel. So I plugged in the tilt sensor and tried again. don't touch it. I'm so happy it runs. I think it's ready for the first test drive. It's been all right up and down the drive. So it's been 5 months of hard work. Let's hope it's worth it. If you haven't already, now would be a good time to subscribe. Let's take it on a drive. You're gonna jump in it and I'll push you back if you want. Becky gets the first drive. That's as far as I've got.
That's great.
I'm knackered from pushing it that up the hill. What's up with it now? Just needs to warm up. I've not got a choke on it. Right, let's go. Fucking hell. Handbrake's on. We're moving. Gears feel good. Okay, so the first job today is fix the clearance issues. As some of you have noticed, the engine does sit quite low in the car and it's already scraped a few times getting it on and off the drive. But unfortunately, it's as low as I could get it. I didn't want to have to cut a massive hole in the bonnet and have the engine poking out the top. But luckily for me, there is a solution. I've got a slimline oil pan, and once fitted, it will take a good few inches off the bottom of the engine, meaning I can get rid of that massive wheel arch gap. So I'm going to start off by removing the front bumper, which is just held on by a few clips. That's because it'll make my life much easier removing the oil cooler, which I need to do to fit the new oil pan and new exhaust, but I'll get to that later on in the video. And while I'm removing the oil pan, I might as well do an oil change, since I've got to drain it out anyways. Then I need to remove an oil pressure restrictor, which I think is behind the oil filter. That's because the new oil pan doesn't allow for an oil cooler, so I won't be running one. But that means all the oil that would have gone to the cooler will then create excess oil pressure, and that needs to go somewhere. So if I remove this restrictor behind the oil filter, it will then create enough flow for the excess oil pressure to just return to the sump, and it should be sound. Then I've just got to undo all the bolts holding the sump on, and with a little tap, it comes off. Now I'm removing the oil cooler, which is held on by this bracket I made especially for it just a few weeks ago. And it was only a matter of time before these old rusty lines gave up. I've also got to put on a new oil pickup, which came with a kit. This is basically a big straw for the oil to be sucked up and sent to different parts of the engine. Now I'm just going around the whole area and cleaning up all the old gasket and gunk build-up so we get a good seal when the new gasket goes on. And to get a good seal, the new sump has to be tightened properly in a crisscross pattern. I've just got to block off the hole on the engine where the oil cooler pipe bolted to, otherwise I'll have oil leaking everywhere later on. And to do that, I've got inventive. I've used the original flange off the oil cooler pipe since it already had the O-ring on it, and I just welded up the centre. Now I can fill it with 4 litres of fresh oil and we're done. So that's the new Sunline oil pan fitted. While the car's already jacked up, I can move on to getting the wheels off, getting the struts off, and getting the new 50mm lowering springs fitted to get rid of that massive wheel arch gap. So let's crack on. Now, you've all probably seen hundreds of cars being lowered, so I'll power through it and make it quick. I just hope these 50mm lowering springs are enough, because that wheel arch gap is massive, and 50mm doesn't sound like that much. And unfortunately, to fit these new springs, I had to take the whole strut off with the hub still attached, because it's welded on. Once they're off, I can buzz the top mount off, slide on the new spring and reassemble. Then once I've finished this side, I just had to do the same on the other side. But first, I couldn't resist checking out the ride height, which didn't quite go as planned. That's one side done, let's get it jacked down, see what it looks like. Hopefully it'll look alright when it's on the floor, fully. Shall I jack the other side down quick and see what it looks like before I do the other side?
How long will it take to do the other side?
Like half an hour.
Yeah, just do it.
Just wait.
It just seems like a fad.
And I was just too impatient. I had to see what the ride height looked like. Probably just because this side's still up. Yes. I mean, it just looks like a standard car now, doesn't it? It doesn't really look lowered, but it's all right, isn't it? So. It's not all right. I've bought new springs. These are 60mm, so they're 10mm lower than what's on. And if I'm not happy with how these sit, I'll just have to accept it, because you can't get any lower. And if you're wondering why I didn't just cut a bit off the 50mm springs, I tried that and it didn't work. Now I'm another £120 into springs. I could have got coilovers at this point, but here we are.
You opening them up? Well done.
Oh yeah. In case you want to see them, it's not just an empty box. Happy?
Yeah.
And so am I. Just wait until you see how these new springs look. And they're even red, so they're definitely better. Now I'm just repeating the whole process again, which is pretty easy when you've done it once or twice. Then I can move on to getting the new 60mm lowering springs compressed. That's so the strut will stick out just enough at the end to fit the top mount on and the nut to hold it all together. Once that's all built up, I can throw it back together and hope and pray it looks lowered this time. Hopefully it actually looks lowered this time. That's not bad, you know.
Yeah,
I'm happy with that. That's the same as the back, look. Look. Exactly the same.
All the tools you've got and you're using your fingers to measure.
I'm happy with that, and that's the main thing. So, what's next? Exhaust. We're going to fix the exhaust, get it out the back. I've bought one off Facebook Marketplace, so all I've got to do is connect the bike manifold to this Sportex exhaust, which was only £140, and it's basically brand new, which I think is a steal considering how much work it's going to save me building a whole new exhaust. It might not make it sound better, but it'll definitely be quieter, which will make a nicer driving experience. So the plan is get rid of the side exit exhaust and make a proper one out the back. This should make a huge difference to how this car sounds. But first I've actually got to fabricate it to work. The exhaust I bought will come to just behind the engine, so I've just got to get the header pipes over to the exhaust and connect the two together. And to connect the two together, I'm using 45-degree bends and pie cuts. As you can see, once they're stacked on top of each other, they make a nice tight bend without losing any pipe diameter. Now, I'm not an exhaust fabricator or any fabricator for that matter, so go easy on me in the comments, but this should do the job for now. Then I'm just using a clamp to connect the exhaust. That's just so if I ever need to remove it, I can. Sounds alright, doesn't it? But that's all you're getting for now. Of course, there's still one more thing I've got to fix, and that is the shifter. A lot of you guys brought to my attention, it does actually shift the wrong way, but I should be able to reroute the cable and make it so that pulling back is going up the gears and pushing forward is going down the gears. So let's get to it. And changing the direction it shifts was fairly straightforward. I just had to reroute the cable, which I did by drilling a hole through the firewall and a hole through the exhaust tunnel. That's to make the cable sit high enough to connect onto the engine 180 degrees from where it was before. I've basically just spun the direction it connects onto the engine, which should then spin the direction it shifts. And after some drilling and tapping, I've utilised a fairing bolt from the bike as an adapter to connect the cable to the shifter. Right, that was actually pretty easy to sort the gears. I should have done that from the start. Now the car's lowered, I've got the exhaust out the back and the gears shift the right way. Let's take it out, get some good sound clips, no music, no nothing. Let's go. But then, after doing the first pull in the car, it overheated, and I couldn't figure out why. At first I thought it was because the radiator wasn't getting enough airflow, but it had never overheated before. Then I noticed the oil level, or more like non-existent oil level. Now these engines don't have a dipstick, only a sight glass on the side, which I checked was full after doing the oil change earlier. But all I could do now was hope there was some in it, even if I couldn't see it. And being stuck in the middle of the countryside at 8 PM on a Saturday ain't ideal, so we decided to get an Uber back, grab some oil and come back to save the day. And after topping it all with oil, the car still overheated. So all I can put it down to is that the radiator wasn't getting enough airflow mounted behind the bumper. So in a desperate attempt to get some long-awaited driving clips, I temporarily put the original radiator on from the bike, which is definitely bigger than what I was using. But, well, it looked like this. Which, let's be honest, isn't ideal. This radiator looks horrible and I wish I never went to all the effort cutting the bumper to make it fit. So to fix it, I've been and got a new bumper and a new radiator. This will be the third radiator going on this car, so I'm hoping third time lucky. It's for a Suzuki SV1000, and the reason I bought this radiator is because it's flat and has a different inlet and outlet design to what I'm currently using, which should fit a lot better behind the bumper and keep that sleeper look that I'm after. So let's get to it. So again, I'm going to start by removing what's left of the front bumper, which isn't much at this point. And working on this car is never straightforward, so fitting this radiator is no different. The first problem being is this radiator has an inlet, an outlet, and a return line, which I think is to bleed the air out. But this radiator only has an inlet and an outlet. So to give it a return line like this radiator currently has, I've bought this piece, which I can hopefully drill a hole here and tap this piece in. This will basically make the radiator the same setup as the standard one, so I've just got to carefully drill it out one size smaller than the tap I'm using. Then tap the hole, which is super easy into aluminium. Once that's done, I can just wrap the fitting in some PTFE tape to prevent leaks later on. And that's a job well done. Then this ugly old radiator can come off. Honestly, I don't know what I was thinking having this coming out the front like some scrappy challenge build. But at least it comes off easy. It's literally only been on while I waited for this new radiator to ride. I think my original thought process with fitting this radiator is that the car had been overheating and I just wanted something that would work. And what better radiator to use than the one Suzuki designed for this engine all them years ago. And once I'd spent all the time making the brackets and connecting it up, I never expected I'd have to cut so much of the bumper away. It kind of happened little by little, just trimming more and more off until there was nothing left. And by that time, I committed to it. But even after wasting all my time, I'm still glad to be swapping it out. Then after mocking up the new radiator, I could instantly see that's going to fit so much better. How much better does that look? Now I can cut off the old mounting brackets and sand them smooth with a flat disc, like it never even happened. And while I'm there, I'm just cleaning up the area to weld new brackets on for the new and improved radiator. And to make the brackets, or any shape out of metal, the best way I found is to make cardboard templates. It's so much quicker to get the shape you want, then you only have to cut the metal out once. And if you're wondering how I even got to this point, you can check out my other videos on this build where I literally started from a fully stocked Peugeot 106. And if you don't want to miss any future videos, please hit that subscribe button. And after drilling a couple of holes, I can bolt them onto the radiator and check the fit. Then I'm just using the old bumper to check the clearance because I don't want to have to do this again, and that massive gap I've cut away actually made things easier. Once I'm happy, it's time to weld them on. Then, after they're welded, they wouldn't look right without some paint, so I quickly chucked some primer and Nighthawk black paint on, which is a Honda colour I had left from a previous video. Then it's just a case of bolting a new radiator up. And it looks so much better. Now I can squeeze the old hoses on, which don't actually fit bad considering this radiator is for a completely different bike, even if I did have to cut one. And if you're wondering why I've not put a radiator fan on, it's because I've not ordered one yet. I wanted to make sure this radiator would work first. And luck must be on my side because the old coolant temp sensor threaded straight in too. The last hose is just to extend the coolant cap, which is great because I can mount it anywhere in the engine bay and it makes it a lot easier to fill. Then I've just mounted a bracket to the slam panel so I've got something to mount the coolant cap to. It almost looks OEM. And of course, not forgetting to fill the system. The only problem now is I need to cut up another bumper, but not to the same extremes as before. Just some light modification which involves removing a lot of the grille and some inner plastics of the bumper. That looks mint. So now the radiator's sorted, let's take it out again, hopefully no breakdowns, and get some good driving clips. Let's go. It's finally running and driving. But there's one problem. It still looks like a 25-year-old beat up grocery getter. So today I'm gonna change that. And to do that, we're gonna paint it. But unfortunately, I don't have thousands of pounds to spend getting it professionally painted or buying a blow-up paint booth. So we're doing it right here on the driveway. But first, if you watched the last video, you'll know there's a couple of things I've got to rectify. The first being the oil cooler. You guys made it clear in the comments it's a bad idea to remove it. So I've listened. I've bought this oil cooler. It's from a Toyota Avensis and it should be small enough to fit behind the bumper but big enough to do the job. And it's got these 8mm hose connections which will make it super easy to connect up. But because it's not a standard oil cooler or oil cooler kit, I'm gonna have to do a little more work to make it fit. Which unfortunately means undoing some of the work I did in the last video because I need to get the oil cooler back in this setup. The problem is, since I'm running this slimline oil pan for ground clearance, I can't just swap the old oil pan back on and call it done. But even though I'm not refitting the old oil pan, I've still got to remove the new one because it needs to be adapted to take an oil return line. For that, I've just picked up an 8mm barbed fitting, which just needs an M14 thread to screw into. So the first step is drilling and tapping an M14 hole into the sump, and hopefully not making a mess of it. Once that's done, the return side of things is basically sorted, which means I'm halfway there. The next job is getting an oil feed to the cooler, and for that I'm going to reuse the stock outlet but with a bit of a twist. The original oil cooler lines were crimped and fixed in place, which makes them useless for what I need, so I've just bought another 8mm fitting that I'll be welding onto the stock outlet flange. The only catch is, back in the last video I actually blanked this outlet off, thinking I'd never need it again. So before I weld anything, I need to drill it back out. With the hole drilled, I can weld the new fitting onto the flange, bolt it back in place and then crack on mounting the new oil cooler. That's just a case of making up some simple brackets to hold it securely and then connecting everything together using some oil safe hose. And before I forget, I've reinstalled the restrictor back behind the oil cooler just as it was before. So the oil cooler's all sorted and that's nearly all the engine work done. But if you saw the last video, you'll know the throttle cable snapped. Luckily, you can buy a repair cable that comes with all the end you'll ever need. So let's try and fix it. So even though this fault almost left me stranded, the actual fix is dead simple with this repair kit. And no, just because it's a repaired cable, it don't mean it's going to be any weaker than a brand new one. All I've got to do is slide a new end onto the cable and tighten it down. That's job done. But to make sure I don't end up snapping another cable, which I definitely don't want happening again, I need to sort out a throttle stop at the pedal, which is something I completely overlooked before. The problem is, as you can see, the throttle pedal stops under cable tension way before it actually hits the floor of the car. So with my heavy foot on the throttle, all the extra force has to go somewhere, which in this case is the cable. To stop it happening again, all I've got to do is raise the factory throttle stop so the pedal itself bottoms out instead of relying on the cable. And in true professional fashion, I've done it with, yeah, a block of wood. Surprisingly, it actually worked mint. Now the throttle cable's fixed, I can start it to check the oil cooler's got no leaks. And the battery's flat. But luckily, Top Don have just sent me this jump starter, and it's actually pretty sick. Because honestly, it's been a bit of a game changer. It's the Top Don JS3000 jump starter, and it'll pretty much start out you've got cars, trucks, boats, whatever. If it's got an engine and a battery, chances are it'll get it going. So it's dead handy to have about. And what's sick is that it's not just a jump starter. It doubles up as a 2,400 amp hour power bank. So you get 2 USB ports, a USB-C port, and a 16.8 volt DC port. So there's plenty of power to charge all your stuff. It's even got a big torch on the front if you need it, and it comes in a proper tough carry case. I'm actually quite fussy when it comes to tools, but this feels really well built and good quality. So after using it, I would definitely recommend it. Look at that straight away, full of life. And the best bit is, Top Don gave me a bit of a discount to pass on to you guys. So if you want to grab one, use the link in the description and get yourself a bit of a discount. Anyway, back to the video. Now with the engine side of things finally finished, it's time to sort out the way this car looks. Over the past few months, I've built this crazy superbike powered Peugeot 106. But from the outside, you'd never even know. It's got nearly 25 years of scrapes, scratches, paint neglect and dirt build-up. So today it's time for it to change. This will definitely be the biggest paint job I've ever tackled. And you're probably wondering what colour paint I've gone for, but I'll show you that a bit later on in the video. Because first, I feel like I've got a cheat code to fix all the bodywork. All the dents and scrapes, they're pretty much sorted. Let me show you. I've managed to pick up a bonnet, 2 wings, a complete door, and the bumper you've already seen on the car. And because it's just a Peugeot 106, all those panels were dirt cheap, and it's going to save me so much time trying to fill all the dents around the car. So I'm going to start off by removing the bonnet, which is literally just 4 bolts and 2 gas struts to disconnect. And yes, believe it or not, this car actually came with gas struts from standard. Once the new bonnet's on, I can move on to the wings. These are pretty much the same story, about 4 bolts holding each one on, and then it's just a case of disconnecting the indicators and swapping the panels over. It's a simple process, but you've got to be careful not to scratch or dent anything while moving them around, otherwise the whole task is pointless. Then, once that's done on one side, I'll just repeat the same on the other side, making sure each panel lines up properly before moving on. Finally, after double checking the bonnet and wing alignment, I can whip off the old door, which is just 2 bolts and not even a single wire to disconnect. Honestly, without removing these panels, I'd have spent at least a week filling and sanding dents around the car, because the camera really makes the old panels look a lot better than they actually were. But I guess that's what you get buying a car covered in an inch of snow. With most of the dents out the way, I can move on to the longest and most tedious part of stripping the car down and removing everything I don't want covered in paint. I'm starting with the parts that are relatively easy to remove and leaving the trickier bits for later, when the power of masking tape can do its thing. And after full steam ahead removing parts, I suddenly had a realisation. I should probably wash the car at this point. Cleaning it now means the parts I'm removing are clean as well as the rest of the car. Plus, it was actually a nice break from the constant work of removing parts. So I'm just going around all the seals and trims with a detailing brush, aka a paintbrush, to agitate all the stubborn moss and years of dirt build-up. At this point, I'm not really bothered about scratching the paint while I'm washing it, because every surface on this car is going to get sanded down anyway, because if I want a decent paint finish later, it's got to be squeaky clean. Next, I removed the sunroof, mostly because I wasn't really following any logical order, just doing what seemed easiest at the time until I got distracted by the next thing. that's out. And with the car looking more and more like a breaker, I had a thought. I wasn't originally planning on removing the engine, but it is a bit crusty and I don't know if it's going to annoy me if I don't do it. Plus, all the engine mounts I've painted are just matte blacked. The welding that I've done is just spray painted with matte black, and I could do with painting the inside of the wings here, which if I do with the engine in and the bonnet shut, they're not going to get painted. But hopefully I can take it apart with the radiator still connected, oil cooler still connected, just disconnect what's needed, sounds easier than it is, and get it out. Like I say, this is my first paint job and it's a lot of work. It's currently 11 o'clock. So let's see how long it takes to get the engine out. And with that being said, it really shouldn't take long at all. I literally built this thing from a standard 1.1 litre Peugeot 106. So by now I should know exactly how everything comes apart, which makes this a lot less stressful. The cool thing about this being a superbike engine is that the gearbox and engine are combined, which makes it super compact and really easy to manoeuvre in and out of the engine bay. And because it's chain driven, I don't even have to remove the drive shaft to get the engine out, which saves a ton of time. I just had to jack up the car a little to reach the exhaust clamp and lower engine mount. Disconnecting the drivetrain is dead simple too, just a case of taking the chain off. Once everything's disconnected, it's finally time for the fun part, craning the engine out. And I think it's fair to say that was pretty timely. Engine's out, and it's took me just over an hour. Not bad going, to be fair. And it's a good job I removed the engine after all, because it revealed some highly unwanted rust holes on the opposite inner wheel arch to the one I'd already replaced a few videos ago. But the best way to deal with stuff like this is just to accept it, crack on, and get it done. Here you can see me cutting some small plates to replace the rusty metal. And once I've got the outline sorted, I can remove the rust with a die grinder. Not the most effective tool, but it's what I had lying around. Then, with the plates fitting somewhat snug, I can get them welded in and hopefully be done with fixing rust on this car once and for all. And with the rust finally sorted, I can give the engine bay its first proper clean in 25 years, and I'm really hoping that doesn't lead to any more unwanted discoveries. And while that's drying, I can move on to some more paint prep, which means tackling one of the only bits of damage left on the car, the scrape on the rear quarter panel. Unfortunately, you can't just unbolt and replace a rear quarter panel on a Peugeot 106, so this one's down to the filler. Filler, in my opinion, is a really hard skill to master, but I've watched enough YouTube videos to give it a go, and honestly, what better car to practice on than this one? While that's drying, I've gone over the whole car with a 600 grit sanding disc on the DA. And I'm making sure to cover absolutely every surface, because anything I miss won't let the new paint stick properly. And to get the filler as flat as possible, I'm always using big sanding blocks and trying to follow the curves of the body line. It takes a few goes to get it looking somewhat decent, but while that's drying, there's still plenty more to crack on with. So now I'm just starting to tape up everything I couldn't be bothered to remove. A bit tedious, but it's all part of getting a proper finish. And if you're enjoying this type of content, please help me out and hit that subscribe button. It's completely free and it'll help me grow the channel, meaning I can keep bringing you videos just like this one, plus you're less likely to miss any future videos too. Then, before masking the engine bay, I gave every nook and cranny a scuff up with a Scotch-Brite pad, which took absolutely ages. Honestly, if you do this for a living, hats off to you, but you might want to click off the video before I actually start painting. So once I'd spent a lifetime Scotch-Brite in every surface in the engine bay, I had to carry on masking everything left attached to the car that I didn't want painted. And I definitely underestimated how much masking there actually was. Okay, so I'm currently getting rained on, but I've finished prepping the whole car, which it took a good week, so I'm so happy it's done. Firstly, I filled and sanded all the remaining dents, then I went over the whole car with a D8 and Scotch-Brite'd in all the nooks and crannies, especially in the engine bay. It took forever. Then finally, I went over the whole car with a degreaser. So let me show you the new paint. It's called Evil Emerald Black Pearl, a custom colour which in a dull lighting looks almost black, but then in the sun should look super metallic. And I'm so excited to see it on the car. So even though it is raining, I am going to paint some of the car because I want to do it in two parts to try and make life easy. First, I'm going to paint the inside of the bonnet and the engine bay. Then once that's done, I can close the bonnet and go around the whole car painting the outside. And for the first coat, because the engine's got quite a lot of bare metal showing, I've got to use something called an etch primer. The reason for that is because etch primer is unlike any standard primer. It's specifically designed for use on bare metal, and that's down to it containing an acid that lightly etches into the metal, giving it a super good grip and some corrosion protection too. And after going what felt like pretty much the whole engine bay with etch primer, I can go over the top of that with high build primer. That's just to make sure every surface is nice and uniform, hopefully covering up any chips or sanding marks. Then with the primer done, it's finally time to lay some paint. As I said before, if you're a professional, I'm sorry you're watching this, because I'm definitely not a professional. I'm just having a go and trying to learn along the way. With the base coat done, all that's left is to apply a thick coat of lacquer, which gives all the paint its nice deep shine, and in my case a few runs. Then it's just a case of repeating all the steps I've done in the engine bay on the rest of the car. So I'm back to square one on the primer, but this time I'm only covering any filler work I've done, because from my research it should be fine spraying on top of the original lacquer, as long as it's been sanded for a good key and is in good condition. And just like before, it's time for base coat. It all comes together so quick. Weeks of prep work and the whole car will be painted in probably under an hour. Then to finish it all off, I've applied a good amount of professional grade 2K lacquer, which gives it a nice shiny finish and dries rock hard like factory paint, meaning I can fight off them stone chips for years to come. That's the car all painted, it's looking sick. It's had overnight to dry, it's already been rained on, but I did have an accident with some dandelion seeds, which I'm hoping I can sand out when it's fully dry. So let's get it unmasked and start the rebuild. And after unmasking all my hard work, it's not long before it starts to look like a car again, which is super exciting. Every piece I put on just makes it one step closer to this project finally being finished. And if you're wondering what I'm going to be doing with this car, head over to my Instagram where in the near future I'll be announcing what's happening with it. And one of you guys might end up with it. After the engine's all bolted up, I decided to give the bird's nest of a wiring loom a tidy up, removing all unnecessary wires, replacing old tape with new, and just routing everything as neat as possible. And with that done, it's time to have a proper look at the car.